Hello, everybody. Hope that you are all doing well. We will get started here in just a few minutes. Today's presentation is going to be all about our transportation department. Just a couple of updates. We are kind of nearing the end of Community Academy. We have a few more weeks to go. So just wanted to make sure that you guys know that the last few weeks are heavily in person. So just to keep checking and referring back to your calendar, and if you ever have any questions about where we're going to be or whatever, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will get back to you. But without further ado, I will promote Suzanne to panelist. Suzanne Flowers is the transportation manager for transportation department right now. And they will talk to you about all things transportation. So, Suzanne, whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry, I missed that wonderful introduction. Thank you. As it was promoting me, it totally was like, you have to wait. You can't hear anything. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen for I okay, Zoom has had an update. I don't actually see a share screen option
Okay.
unless it's moved.
It should just be right at the bottom. I'll
Okay,
make you.
yep. I do see it now. It was
Okay.
not there a second ago, so maybe the update is a little slow for me. Okay, give me just a moment. All right, and I'm just verifying that you can see my first slide that says City of Ann Arbor Transportation.
Yes, we sure can.
Fantastic. All right, well, I'll get started. All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Suzanne Flowers. I am a transportation program manager on our transportation team at City Hall. So we are housed in the kind of engineering department and all part of the public service unit team at the city. A little bit about me. I went to Western Michigan University. I did not go to the University of Michigan. I do apologize, but I did grow up in Southwest Michigan, so that made a lot more sense for me in undergrad and grad school. And, I took a very non-traditional path to the work that I do today. Most people do go to a urban planning program, and I kind of did this surreptitious route with my undergraduate degree in secondary education, which I did teach for 2 years. And then I decided to get my graduate degree and needed to do an internship and just happened to meet someone at a training I had signed up for, and that was at the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. And that is really where I fell in love with the work that I get to do today for the residents of Ann Arbor. So, just a little bit about um, a little bit more. Sorry, my family just walked in. I was waiting for my son to walk into the room. He did not. So one of the things that I think is a real value add for myself as a team member is I actually drive, walk, bike, and take public transit sometimes, not every day, but different times throughout the week. I live outside of the city limits. And since I don't have dedicated parking at City Hall, it has allowed me the benefit of seeing our community from a lot of different perspectives. So when you're walking, you see things one way, when you're on the bus, when you're biking, and when you're driving. Um, and one of the things that I'm actually most proud of is I'd never actually taken the bus until I moved to Washtenaw County in circa 2014, 2015. And at my old employer at the Washtenaw Area Transportation Study, we didn't have dedicated parking either. And so I really needed to find a new way to traverse the new community that I was working in. And I tell you, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And I think it has really helped propel me into a better professional understanding of the different opportunities and transportation choice that I'm trying to build throughout our community in a much more meaningful way. Um, I actually love riding the bus. I have met so many wonderful people and friends that actually see colleagues on the bus now. And some of my best stories come from riding the bus and, walking around our community. And again, I think that my perspective makes me a better planner because I can really understand the different perspectives that commuters and residents have by just taking different modes of transportation. And that is just a picture of my son and I. I'm trying to get him to ride his bike a little bit more. He is a teenager now, but I am still trying my very best. So one of the things that I think is or can be very challenging in the transportation world is perspective. How we travel really impacts how we may perceive people and, how the priorities that may be felt by different populations. So I had my son take this photo when we were driving one day, but this is me on my bus on Route 31 on Dexter. This is just me walking home one day. This would have been obviously winter. And this is actually me trying to cross the street after getting off of the bus. Sometimes people don't realize that, putting someone's life in jeopardy can be very scary. But when you are behind the wheel, this is your perspective. You don't see what it feels like or that potential level of stress that like a pedestrian or a cyclist feel when they're very exposed. They don't have that kind of armor around them, the armor of a wonderfully clean, highly efficient bus, and that protection from a personal automobile. Not everybody can drive. Again, my son is only 14. He is just not able to do that yet. Some people can't afford to drive, and some people choose to not drive anymore for various reasons. So, our team is really tasked with ensuring the safe movement of all people, no matter what mode they choose to use. So this is our team. I'm going to grab a sip of tea real quick. We are down one team member. So we are currently hiring a transportation manager, and we are actually going to be losing another team member at the end of this month. Our interim manager and team member, Luke Liu, will be leaving the city at the end of this month. So there will be a mighty team of four. So we are tasked with a lot, and I'm very proud to be a part of this multidisciplinary team of planners and engineers for all of the work that we have accomplished up to this date and time and what we continue to move forward on a day-to-day basis. So what are some of those tasks? Well, we review all private development projects. So everything that you're seeing being built, the hotels, the multi-story, multi-family residential buildings, student housing, that comes before a transportation team member. Right now, that would be Luke, Cynthia, Cyrus, and my colleague Trevor. We also work on our own capital projects, which I'll get into in a little bit later, but we are also assigned to all CIP or capital improvement projects. For example, the Miller Road project that you all see being undertaken, a transportation engineer is assigned to those projects to review the transportation impacts and to also ensure that it aligns with our goals and objectives from our transportation master plan. We have a fingerprint on all of the signs and signals and pavement marking work that goes on across the city. We do have our counterparts at the signal shop at Wheeler that is run by Mark Marino and the team there. So they're working on, making sure our signals are working properly, that our signage is up if something maybe gets hit. Sometimes those signal cabinets get hit by vehicles, and that's part of our team's effort and work to make sure that all of those physical infrastructure pieces and the kind of behind the scenes are operational each day. We do coordinate with a lot of other city departments, the Office of Sustainability, public works, all of the complexity of anything that's going on below ground. If there's work to be done, transportation is being brought in to kind of act as like a mini consultant. We also coordinate a lot with external partners, our partners at the DDA, AAATA, the university, and so many other areas, because what is happening has a direct impact on our transportation system and the mobility of our residents. Excuse me, I will say any other task that gets assigned, that pretty much well could be anything from day to day and week to week. We do actively apply for grants at the federal level and at the state level, and we manage a lot of contracts. That's some of the work that we do to ensure that the projects that we're trying to deliver are delivered successfully and per the agreement. So let's kind of get into a bit of what are our shared mobility goals across the city. And I have these up on the screen for you. And they're really baked in a philosophy of Vision Zero, where no one dies or is seriously injured in crashes on Ann Arbor streets. And yes, I do see that date of 2025, and I am very well aware of the calendar year by which we are in. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we also have a partnership of being carbon neutral by 2030. We want to have our transportation system moving towards a place that is sustainable and that is not, contributing to any of the greenhouse gas emissions um, by the year 2030. How did we get here? I hear this comment a lot. It's all happening so fast. And I can understand that perspective. And I really lean on this wonderfully developed timeline from our transportation master plan to help us understand really where some of these kind of actions and ideas started. So if we go all the way back to 1990, that is when we had our first transportation plan. I do remember the 90s very well, and it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but unfortunately it is. We have our first non-motorized transportation plan, many years later in 2007. And then we really start to see more plans and changes being brought forward that really bring together the values that the residents are kind of wanting at a policy and city-wide level. So you see our transportation plan update. We have some corridor studies for areas that we know are problematic, such as North Main Street, State Street. We have a framework that the DDA provides for our street design and our downtown spaces. We have, additional projects like the connector, the tree line that are brought forward because these are big ideas that we need to start analyzing and understanding how they impact the work that we do. Our transportation master plan was adopted in 2021, and we see the carbon neutrality plan adopted in 2020. So while that change like we're seeing a lot of those changes being impacted today, we can really look back to, the early 90s and early 2000s is kind of moving and rolling those pieces forward. And that's why you're seeing so many of the positive changes on the ground today, especially in the transportation world. We also know more. We understand how we want to achieve some of the goals in a transportation system. And, the old way of doing things isn't working. So this Vision Zero approach is really kind of turning things on its head. This traditional approach was that, well, we're going to have traffic deaths. Behavior, humans have to be perfect. That's how we're going to design our system, is that a person will never ever make a mistake. We're just going to prevent as many collisions as possible. We're going to put all of the responsibility on each individual because, again, humans are perfect. And, saving lives is just really expensive. And I will say that model has been around for a long time. And I like using the airplane sort of model. If we have an airplane crash, we ground planes. Imagine if we did the same thing for cars. We wouldn't even conceive of that. That is because we are still thinking about vehicle movement as an individual, each person needs to be able to make that change themselves instead of looking at it from a really the emergency that it is. And so Vision Zero, this approach that we have adopted, looks at things much differently. We should be doing everything that we can to prevent traffic deaths. We need to integrate that humans will make mistakes, but those mistakes should not cost anyone their lives. We can prevent, and we should do everything we can to prevent fatal and serious crashes. And we need to think about things in a much more systemic approach, not, okay, if you just wear the seatbelt, that will be good enough. No, we have to think of things much more holistically. And that saving lives is not expensive at all. It is the thing that we should be doing because the economic impacts of that is very dire for our community long term. Vision Zero is not the absence of crashes. I just want to make sure that I do have that on the slide, but is the absence of fatal and serious injury crashes. And that is really where our team is singularly focused, is how do we get to zero? How do we ensure if a crash happens that the speeds are low enough, that the people are protected enough, that we have multiple layers in place to protect them from the most serious injury, which would be a fatality. And so we can look to US DOT and the Federal Highway Administration and their safe systems approach, their model. When we adopted our plan, this actual vision had not come out yet from US DOT, so we're really trying to do a better job of integrating that now. So I talked about all of these multiple systems that need to be in place in order for us to all get to our destination safely. And so we have to think about things as like this big wheel. We need safe roads, we need safe speeds, safe vehicles, safe road users, and post-crash care. So we need to design our system from an engineering perspective that minimizes those opportunities for human mistake. That's why you see maybe in a more rural area, the kind of rumble strips, sometimes on the edge of the road or sometimes even in the middle. That's because they are trying to correct a behavior of, veering off the road so somebody can correct before maybe they get into a ditch. We have to have speeds that are set appropriately that people are not going to exceed. Um, we can do a lot of things, but if somebody chooses to do 90 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, that may not be the best decision possible. But what can we do from a design perspective and an enforcement perspective that would discourage that kind of behavior? We also need policies to address safe speeds, such as red light running cameras. I'm a huge proponent of that, but they are not permitted in the state of Michigan. We also need safe vehicles. So I think that the automobile industry has done a tremendous job with this. There are so many new technologies that are put in place. The design of a vehicle is meant to take all of the impact and not impact, the occupants of that vehicle. That is one of those key pieces that industry has done. We also need safe road users. We need people to walk in a marked crosswalk, be predictable. We need people to wear seatbelts. We want people to, again, use the very best judgments and then build in the redundancy around them to ensure that there is safety. And then we really need to look at the post-crash care. So if there is a crash, do we have the people in place to respond in a timely manner? Do we have all of those supports in place to ensure that there is safe transport? That is an area I don't know as much about, but it is something that we are trying to learn as a transportation team, how we can be a part of that system. And I think our community is very, very fortunate. We have some of the best medical facilities in the country. And so that close proximity in our community and even in our county to that high quality medical care can drastically improve the outcome following a crash. So this is just those safe system principles, which you kind of saw a little bit in Vision Zero. This redundancy I have really harped on a lot because it is very, very important. Putting all of the onus on just safe vehicles isn't going to get us to zero. We really need this holistic approach to ensure we have positive outcomes. Give me a moment. So in our community, all of the timelines, all of the plans, all of the work that we're doing, is it working? Are we seeing mode shift? Are we seeing some differences? Yes, we most certainly are. So anyone can look for this data at SEMCOG. This is the American Community Survey data. It is a subset of census data, and you can get this in 1, 3, and 5-year increments. I tend to go with the 5-year increments. They're a little bit more accurate. And when we look at how the people of Ann Arbor choose to get to work, this is get to work. We can see that of our community population that were sampled for the statistically significant sampling, they estimate that 3.5% of our city population bike to work. In comparison to the rest of Southeast Michigan as a region, so the 7-county region of like SEMCOG, we're at 3.5. The rest of the region is at 0.3. Are we carpooling and vanpooling? Yes, we are doing a great job, and so is the region. We are definitely upticking in a positive way there, finding those opportunities for ride sharing. The big one that sticks out to me, though, is are more people driving by themselves? I was actually really surprised this has gone up a little bit from the last ACS data that I got. SEMCOG is at almost 81% of the regional population driving alone, but in Ann Arbor, it's 51%. So we have almost half of our population that is choosing to travel to work in a different way. And we are also providing those opportunities to do that. We look at public transportation, which would be AAATA, the ride, providing us almost 10% of our trips. Walking, we're providing the opportunities to shift that mode by sidewalk gap infilling, providing, safe crosswalks and mid-block crossings. And I think the biggest change that we've seen is this number of, people being able to work from home. So this is a newer phenomenon following, the COVID-19 pandemic. We're really seeing that impact our transportation and the travel patterns and the changes that we're seeing there. I can't say this enough, but this framework by which we're trying to move our community to align with those goals, we are looking at an entirely new paradigm, an entirely new way of thinking about transportation, where maybe when I grew up, getting my driver's license at 16 was such a rite of passage. It was like, yes, I have some freedom, I have independence. I've come to find that driving does not make me feel free or independent. It can be very stressful, especially in construction season. And I just prefer to walk, bike, and take the bus whenever I am able to. So it really will take a lot of different pieces to get us there. We've talked a little bit about the engineering. We have to look at how are we educating people. So if we do have young drivers and older drivers, middle-aged drivers like myself, do they understand how to interact with a pedestrian? Do they know about our crosswalk compliance law and ordinance where we stop for pedestrians who are in the crosswalk? Do they understand that they need to give cyclists 5 feet when they're passing instead of 3 feet, which the rest of the state has? We need to work with our enforcement partners in AAPD. I will get into a little bit more about some of the enforcement that's happening. But we need them to help us better enforce those posted laws and rules so that we can keep all of our population safe. We need to encourage people to try different ways to travel. Maybe they don't know how. Maybe they're a little intimidated to get on the bus. Can we ride the bus with our friends sometime and just show them how easy it is to get downtown? We must look at how our transportation system has really unjustly burdened some members of our community much more than others. How do we reverse those systemic treatments to make those spaces safe, accessible, and provide mobility choice for anyone? And then we need to make sure that we're evaluating that system. Are we getting the intended outcomes that we want? Maybe it's not a 1 year analysis. Maybe it's every 3 to 5 years that we need to look at. But when we do a project, are we taking before and after data collection points? Are we taking speed data? We need to see what changes are being impacted on the ground. And again, engineering alone, which I know is the most visible way for a lot of us to see the changes, but engineering is not going to get us there. If it were that easy, we would have already done it. There are a lot of other challenges that we have to contend with. And so just thinking, well, we'll redesign the road and that'll fix it. It's just not that simple. I wish it were. Okay, my layer is coming up. Awesome. So one of the ways that if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the crashes, I'm hoping this is going to be very interactive. Yes. We do have a crash reporting website. So right now what you're seeing on the screen is every single crash from 2019 to 2023. Any crash that somebody just had a minor fender bender, crash between vehicles, crashes with bicyclists. So one of the things that I like to do is because I'm really focused so much on the the most severe and our fatal crashes is I turn off that layer and I turn on this layer. And I'm not going to be able to move this around because, oh, yes, I will. Okay. So I'm just looking at pedestrian and bicycle severe crashes and vehicle severe crashes. So now the first map that we had on, there was like a lot of stuff on there. But what I really like to do is look at where are my most serious crashes? Is there a pattern? Is there a concentration happening in our community that I can better identify what's going on here? And then we take a deeper dive as a transportation team and with AAPD on what is going on based on crash reports, which are called UD 10 forms, which again, anyone and everyone can access that data as well. We're using a certified data set. So whatever AAPD, when there is a crash, they fill out a form that gets uploaded to a state database. And once all of the, personal information has been scrubbed, anyone can access that information. So this is one way that I have helped familiarize myself with, again, some of the patterns and locations of what's going on in our community and making sure that I am more knowledgeable about that information. I had referenced the enforcement and how important that piece is in our community. So this is Ann Arbor Police Department's most serious crashes from 2019 through 2024. And I do realize that the last map only had data from 2023. We're still operating with that certified data set that comes out throughout the state. But this layer helps us understand of all of the most serious of serious crashes, across the city during these years that our police department responded to. They call those crash investigation or AI call out locations with this little red pointer. These represent, again, this is not just a simple fender bender. This is something very, very serious where PD wants to make sure that they're on the scene to better understand the conditions. And I would let AAPD further explain anything beyond that. But what is really telling about this map is where they're seeing some problem areas. We're seeing a concentration along this Jackson corridor. We're seeing a concentration along Packard in two really distinct segments. This segment here, and then just east here before US 23. And we're also seeing much more along our Washtenaw Avenue. I do want to take a moment and point out that 2 out of the 3 corridors are MDOT jurisdiction, which means ostensibly we can do very little engineering to impact what is on the ground today. But the opportunity is that AAPD, having that joint relationship, is able to patrol and do additional enforcement along these areas. And that's exactly what our police chief has recently announced. There will be additional enforcement on these 3 corridors of Jackson, Packard, and Washtenaw. We are working with them to put up appropriate signage along these 3 corridors. And I believe that the educational component of that enforcement campaign has already started. So my hats off to our PD friends. They are just doing an amazing job of working to address behaviors that they're seeing that could lead to fatal and serious injury crashes and really being proactive to address those concerns. I noted that engineering solutions alone will not get us to zero, and it will not. We have done, not all, but we have really started chipping away over the last 5 to 10 years, using tools at our disposal or engineering tools such as road diets, so taking maybe a 4-lane or 5-lane cross section down to 3 lanes. We can use lane reduction. We can take a lane that was maybe 15 feet wide and get it down to maybe 10 and a half or 11 feet. These all have a calming impact. It's really a psychological sort of impact to the driver. If the lanes look narrow and feel narrow, people will actually go slower. That's the goal, is to use different types of treatments to to not allow people to do high rates of speed. However, there's only so much of that engineering that we can do within, remember some of those pie charts, we need people to make good decisions. We need people to drive safe speeds. We need people to be proactive. And one of the things that we're really seeing now as it comes to our most fatal and serious injury crashes is that there is a pattern. So we had that pattern of the locations that AAPD had, you know, this pattern here, but then we're also seeing some behavioral patterns. So those that are really jumping out to us that are being repeated consistently when we do have a fatality or a serious injury crash, we have people that are going speed too fast or speeding under, the posted speed limit. We have people that are failing to yield to pedestrians, failing to yield to cyclists, or failing to yield to another vehicle. We have disregard for traffic control devices, such as red light running stop signs, running through a yellow light. And I will tell you, as I wait for the bus, I see, or if I'm riding the bus, I see this happen on a daily basis. I see this in my home community of Dexter as well. Ann Arbor, I don't think is unique in this, but because we have so many more, commuters coming into our community, I think it's easier to notice at times. Um, we do have people who are failing to stop. So just again, running those stop signs or just not even looking at them. And then we do have some, this is an AAPD graphic. We, as a transportation team, don't report crashes on private property. So that's why you would see on railroad tracks, we don't own the railroad tracks in the community. Um, and then we do see this cross not at intersection. We are seeing pedestrians at times, maybe not making the best decision. Drivers may not be expecting them outside of that designated crossing space. And so we want to make sure that we're informing pedestrians and cyclists and drivers, like you have to look for everyone. It is a lot of burden to ask for all people to do, but that's where we have safe road users, so that everyone is being proactive in that step towards safety. So crashes by the numbers, not an easy number to look at. It really isn't. These are real people, these are real lives, and these are real impacts that are being felt across our community every day and every year. So I'm going to start at the bottom chart. This is the same information, but just slightly different, just to call it out. So a property damage crash is exactly what it sounds like. Maybe somebody hit a sign or a pole. It's just property damage. We have three different types of injuries that police use to code the type of injury. Obviously, our very most serious would be a fatality. And then we have what's considered a level A injury. And I can tell you that the level A injury is very broad. It can be, as bad as a traumatic brain injury and as light as a broken leg. So there is a lot of variation with that. And then it just goes down in terms of maybe this was an injury, maybe somebody hurt their neck or they tripped. These things do happen. And then we have, a non-incapacitating injury, maybe a broken wrist, something like that, a strain. But I just want to call out because when we look at the crashes across our community, and I really do want to highlight 0 is the target. 1 is too many. It is far too many in our community. We take this very seriously. Um, and, I just want to say we do take this very, very seriously on our team and in our community. In comparison to the rest of the state, in comparison even to the rest of the country, Ann Arbor predominantly is a very, very safe community when it comes to transportation safety. Um, Again, I know that number 3, that is more than just a number, but when we look at where we are as a community, we don't see a big spike. We don't see 20, 30, 40 fatalities a year. We are very lucky. We have, a lot of systems in place that are working together to keep that number as low as we can. We're also looking at our incapacitating injuries, those serious A-level injuries. And again, the chart before shows that sometimes it's not just engineering. People are driving very erratically. We have seen that kind of narrative come out across the state and the country. I remember during COVID when, there were less people on the road, people were driving like 120 miles an hour on I-94. That's not a safe speed. Um, it just truly is not. So we are really trying to better understand not just the roadway conditions, but what is factoring into, the decisions that people are making and how we can figure out a way to solve this as a community together. We are kind of consumers of this crash data. When PD does their work, we get the benefit of that information. And so when the transportation master plan was developed in 21, there was a lot of momentum and movement to better understand what can be called like a high injury network. Those areas in a community or a county that we're seeing a higher crash number and more severity. Maybe you have more A-level injury crashes. So this map, which is again in our transportation plan, really focuses our efforts on those corridors where we're seeing crash frequency and severity, and we call those our tiered corridors. So we have our tier 1 and tier 2 corridors. So the darker color blue um, are some of those locations, such as Plymouth, Miller, South Main, and then we also have our Focus 2 corridors. And this is really developed from, 1 and 2 standard deviations from the mean. So our Tier 2 corridor would include a segment like Maple, Liberty, portions of Stadium, Huron Parkway. We also use that analysis to help us identify some intersections in our community that we're seeing more serious injury crashes and frequency. So those are represented by these small dots on the map. Yeah. We use this information to inform our capital improvement program. That way we are making investments along corridors that do have the most serious injury. We're also doing a lot of different projects right now to address these kind of tiered corridor status. Sarah, I'm not sure if you want to wait to do questions, but because this is a long block of time and this is a long presentation, I'm happy to address a couple questions now if that would be appropriate.
I think that's great. We do have a couple
Awesome.
in the chat.
That'd be great.
Do you want me to read them out to you?
Yes, please. That would be nice.
Yes. Okay. How are any, wow, all of these are very long, so thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you for the good
Um,
questions.
how are any slash all federal actions, such as contriving of parts of the IRA and IIJA, trickle down into Ann Arbor, if at all? What are
Yes.
the levels of support coming from initiatives like MI Healthy Climate Plan versus other federal funding sources for Ann Arbor area transport electrification efforts?
Okay, so I can address the transportation part of that. So, for example, the city was awarded a Safe Streets and Roads for All federal grant, 3.8 million, $950,000 local match. Because, and I think this is what I'm hearing, so we were a beneficiary of that fund. However, we have run into a little bit of challenge right now where we're not able to move forward with some things because the federal funds are kind of held up. We do have one pot of funds in the amount of $996,000 that City Council was able to take action on one element of our Safe Streets and Roads for All grant for our near miss video analytics system. We're entering into a contract with the University of Michigan to help us facilitate that work. But that is one part of three. So, yes, we did receive some funds. Yes, it was focused on transportation. The other components, I'm simply just not knowledgeable enough about or know anything about to speak to those.
Thank you. Okay, next one. I bike and commute most days year round. As a bike commuter, I have prioritized safer crossing points across busy roads and ways towards downtown that avoid heavy traffic and finding side roads to avoid the car interaction. It appears to me that historically there have been a focus on building bike lanes on busier roads. Has there been any data collected on what routes and interests in bike lanes or off-road bike routes are within and at entry points to the city?
Ooh, that is a long question. Okay, so I'm going to tackle this from a safety perspective. By simply striping, and I'm talking like just the painted bike lane on a road, it can have upwards of a 40% reduction in crashes just by having a striped bike lane. Now, I also understand, like I bike on Dexter, and then I hop over to Washington. I'm not comfortable biking on Huron Street. I'm just not. There's no bike lane on that portion, from the Dexter Ravina split, but I feel comfortable biking in a bike lane. We provide a lot of different options for people's comfort. When you have a low speed, low volume residential road, the types of treatments that we would need to apply are pretty minimal because it already has a low speed and it already has low volumes. When you get to a higher speed, higher volume roadway, such as a Plymouth, an Eisenhower Parkway, I see two different types of treatments along those corridors because of the items that you noted. Um, Every person needs to make that decision for themselves on what they feel most comfortable cycling on. You're permitted to cycle on the sidewalk as long as you yield to pedestrians. You can bike in the bike lane. You can bike on the roadway. We don't have any specific ordinances prohibiting people from which location they would like to cycle in. Um, I do understand the connection that we're trying to make among, not just in the downtown core, but getting out to kind of our neighborhoods and the different types of facilities that we would like. Trails are great. Again, I live in Dexter on the near the border to border trail. It's fantastic, but that's about $1 million a mile to build. And when we have a constrained right of way, we do try to work within the street that we own, because when we work outside of that, then we have to purchase land, which becomes very, very cost prohibitive. I hope that does address your question, and apologies if I didn't get to everything.
All righty. Um, if you can hear anything, it is my dog. She's right below me. I'm so sorry.
Can't hear it all.
She's chewing a ball right now. So I was like, oh God.
That's fine.
Um, 5 feet clearance for cyclists is a reasonable safety measure, especially for higher speed roads. However, many city roads have bike lanes in the gutter. This is confusing for drivers since there are painted road lanes lines which don't honor that 5 foot. I often see cyclists use sidewalk instead of these types of bike lanes. For example, Stadium and Main Street will save street for all, or future capital improvement plans navigate this challenge.
I think what I'm hearing are two different things. One, you want to see people bike in a bike lane. That's their choice. They can bike in the sidewalk or they can bike in the bike lane. I feel fairly confident as a cyclist, and I tend to go in a bike lane. Um, but that's my preference. And again, we don't have any restrictions except if you are cycling on a kind of shared pedestrian space like a sidewalk, you are supposed to yield to pedestrians. That is the rule. The other piece, which was about, oh, the first part of it. Sorry, it was a long question. I'm sorry. Sir, could you reread that question, the last one?
Yeah, 5 feet clearance for like the last part of it or all of it?
Yeah, okay, the 5 foot clearance. So yeah, again, when we are trying to utilize the existing right of way, so like gutter to gutter, sometimes we do have to use that gutter pin in order to get that 5 feet. We think about that from a design perspective and the trade-offs for the movements that we are also trying to get. This could just be an iterative treatment until a larger, more capital intensive project comes through. But that is a permissible use. And I do understand that it can, if there is a big lip on that, that can be uncomfortable. I mean, I've cycled on like Packard. I think that there are some spaces around there. I tend to cycle, excuse me, a little bit towards the left side of um, that painted line, but just inside the bike lane. So I do understand that. And I think that the issue is really about limited space and right of way. Okay.
Alrighty. What percentage of crashes are bike versus pedestrian versus vehicle in the 2019-2024 AAPD map? And what are your thoughts on why those serious accidents are taking place in the concentrated areas you pointed out?
I would have to get back with you on the very specific data request that you had. You are welcome to email me at sflowers@a2gov.org. I'd be happy to get that to you. What we're seeing are some pretty serious bad behaviors. We have the one that really sticks out to me was somebody doing 90 in a residential zone that hit trees and cars and flipped and flipped. Again, that was a residential neighborhood with on-street parking. That's a behavior that is very, very hard to address. I don't recall if there was any other issues that were attributed to that crash. I just remember the speed and the location. That's a challenge. Like, how do we get people to not do that? Um, this is where I actually advocate, like, I'm thinking more about safe vehicles. If we don't have any posted speed in this country that's above 100 miles an hour, then why can cars go 150? I kind of put it back on the auto industry. Why are we permitting vehicles to be designed to go that fast when there are no speed limits that allow that? That to me is just a very rational, logical question. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and this has been very public across the state, we're seeing seatbelt use dip down for like the first time in at least my adult life, which is shocking to me. I did not know that was a thing. So when you have a high rate of speed, you don't have someone belted, that extra layer of safety is just gone. And if you hit something that is stationary, that car is only going to absorb so much. And then you are trying to address the body kinematics of where your body is physically going to go, and the body can only handle so much. And again, that's why we need that post-crash care. And again, where I think Ann Arbor is very fortunate to have so many high-quality medical facilities that when there are those kind of serious crashes, we have wonderful first responders that are on the scene and can get people that medical care that they need. Um, so those are that's two examples. The other thing that I do remember seeing in the data set is motorcycles. I'm not advocating for or against motorcyclists. I've never thought about them as a vulnerable road user, but they only, if they're wearing a helmet and if they have, some of their limited protective gear on, that's it. They're like a fast bicycle. And I hadn't thought about that until much more recently. They don't have that protective shell around them. So again, if there's any mistake, the ability to correct that if you're going faster is much more difficult, and the outcome is usually much worse. So it's really a lot of behavioral components we're seeing. People running, like I said, the red lights, oh my gosh, drives me crazy every day. The stop signs, people not even pedestrians. I almost grabbed someone by their shirt the other day because they were getting ready to walk into traffic. The light was like, don't cross. I was very concerned. So again, we really need everyone collectively to look out for each other, make the best decision possible, and build in those redundancies to protect everyone.
All right, that is what we have for
All
right
right,
now.
cool. All right, well, we'll keep on trucking. So let's talk about a little bit of the design of our roadways. Um, Boy, a lot has happened in just my 3 years at the city. It's kind of amazing how much work our community is able to accomplish when we have winter. I'm always really surprised by that. So I have a couple examples of some of the ways by which we're kind of implementing. Um, Here is Scioto Church Road. I don't have a photo of this, but we have some like sidewalk infill as part of that project. We added, yes, I understand a painted buffered bike lane, but again, we do know that through federal highway research, Even having a bike lane striped can reduce serious injury crashes by 40% for all roadway users. We have RRFBs, which we know are a proven safety countermeasure for pedestrians to cross more safely. This segment of roadway also was road dieted and lane narrowed. So we were able to put in these bike lanes. We're able to give the center turn lane and two travel lanes and give nice prominence to where pedestrians, we really want to encourage pedestrians to cross. Earhart, we have a series of protected bike lanes here, just utilizing pavement markings and what these are called city posts. You see these in a lot of quick build deployments around the country, and we're using them to provide some buffering and protection for cyclists. And then again, some sidewalk infill, and you see this very large roundabout, which roundabouts are again, a proven safety countermeasure. When you have to have people slow down coming into an intersection that maybe had a high predominance of T-bone crashes, you know, the severity of those crashes goes way down because the speed is lower and the angle by which the vehicles are interacting is less severe. So again, you can really minimize the severity of crashes for the users within that. The next series of slides will be a little bit more kind of photo heavy, but some iterative treatments that we can do. You know, sometimes we have a lot of competing interest for transportation, for all of the services that the city provides. And so sometimes we have to make, you know, small changes that can have big impact. So along Maple, this is before I came to the city. This was a 4-lane cross section. So travel lane, travel lane. This was road dieted down. So we ended up with a striped buffered bike lane, 2 travel lanes, and a center turn lane with some marked crosswalks that were much more prominent for the visibility of pedestrians. We can also, again, like the pavement markings that I have noted, excuse me, one of the things that MDOT and the city and now the Washtenaw County Road Commission are utilizing more are wider pavement markings. So these long lines, which, you know, very, very long swath of paint can really impact what that driving surface looks like and feels like. I was on Ellsworth not too long after this was done, and I didn't know that they had done wider long lines and thought they had actually narrowed the roadway. So it actually gave that feel of a tighter, more constrained space. And all that was done was pavement markings. We also did a segment of that on Huron Parkway. We can also do different types of high visibility crosswalks depending on the speed and volume and lane configuration of the corridor. This is obviously Plymouth. One of the iterative changes that have been done, again, before my time at the city, were to come through with this sort of buffering of the bike lane, some high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian activated RRFBs, the gateway signs, refuge island, and again, to narrow those travel lanes. So when you are on the highway, those travel lanes could be like 15, 16 feet wide. And when you come into the city, like we really, really narrow those lanes down because we want you to be in a much more slow environment because these are city streets and not an interstate system. This is a more recent project. If you've been along kind of the Staten Hill area, this is kind of that before cross section of what that looked like. You know, this space looks really, really wide for pedestrians to cross, which gives them more exposure. And being a vulnerable road user, that level of exposure to a vehicle turning on red or running the stop sign or red light. We like to tighten that up during our capital improvement projects to narrow the distance that they actually have to cross and tighten up the turn radiuses as well. So you can see we have adopted a no turn on red policy. You'll see those signs across the community. That was a city council action. Let's see here, about 2 years ago. And that is, there were very specific locations. So this is not citywide, but much more tied to our downtown area. And then you're probably seeing a lot more of green paint. When you see green paint, you should think bikes. That is the kind of approved color from Federal Highway and USDOT. So we have this large bike box at the beginning of the intersection. So a cyclist can queue up here to turn left or here to go straight or turn. And it's really giving them the opportunity to be seen by motorists behind them and give them a head start on the green. We also have these high conspicuity pavement markings. So as somebody is navigating this intersection, drivers are aware and bicyclists align themselves more clearly to that dedicated bicycle space if they're traveling in the bike lane. It is amazing what a little bit of pavement marking material can do with some city posts. This is the Division Cycle Track extension. So I believe this area down here is being redeveloped by the university right now. So we are able to try treatments, see if they're working, and really get that infrastructure in place so it's clear where cyclists can navigate and giving them that dedicated space like we have been giving, vehicles and pedestrians for a long time. One of the safety tools that we can use is that my colleague always says is separating people in time and space. So that's why you will see, pedestrian getting a head start before vehicles get a green light. We want to separate those movements. And then we also want to give that dedicated space to people so that we're not creating unnecessary interactions when possible. Other treatments that we're doing, we did a first round of quick build projects. This was something is kind of the kickoff after the adoption of the Transportation Master Plan. So what we did, this is Packard, for example. We use this green pavement markings to again remind drivers and cyclists, hey, this is a space for them. Please don't drive in it. Don't park in it. It's not a parking space. It's a bike space. We understand that paint is not protection, but that is what we had funding for. So we couldn't do anything more with that at the time. And then this is an intersection downtown, right at the Washington and 4th. So what we did is kind of take pavement markings and these vertical city posts to help narrow the intersection and to give pedestrians a little bit of additional space to take away from drivers. I mean, I'll just be perfectly frank with you. We're really just trying to tighten up the intersection so that people will turn tighter and turn slower. Again, these are proven safety countermeasures to provide for that safer environment in a much more constrained downtown space. And the goal with any of these sort of quick build treatments is when there is a capital project, such as the project like on a Miller or Ann Street coming up, that would be made permanent. I talked a little bit about the partnerships that we have. This is obviously a partnership of the State Street Corridor with the DDA. And there's a lot going on in this space. I will tell you that I've driven this area once and found out that I should never drive there ever again because there are so many people walking, biking. This is a high service transit area as well. And so the designs that went into that were really focused on making this kind of really placemaking sense of place and space where people navigate, they congregate, they're eating lunch, they're doing all kinds of things. And I would defer to the DDA for like specific design questions and interactions with the business community. I was not involved in that. So other ways besides engineering that we're really trying to kind of take that wheel is through different forms of encouragement. We do have a contract with Spin to bring the e-bikes and the e-scooters. The split is with the University of Michigan. I believe we have 50 total e-bikes deployed across the city. And then the scooters, I want to say, are no more than maybe 250, so like 125 kind of make their way back to the campus, and 125 make their way towards more of the city side of things. We are seeing a bit of a downturn in the utilization of these shared mobility devices, and I theorize it's because people are just buying their own. There's so many more on the market, and that is kind of anecdotally what we're kind of seeing around. Um, but we still want to provide that form of, first mile, last mile connection. I took this picture myself, and this is at, Zingerman's on South State Street, by their warehouses and facilities. Lots of other ways to do encouragement. We developed a bike parking pilot program. So we utilized existing city-owned right-of-way, and reached out to local businesses that were adjacent to see if we could maybe repurpose an existing parking space for customers who are arriving by bike. We deployed 3 of those outside of the downtown, to some limited success. And I know that the DDA is expanding their portion of the bike parking permit, and trying to get more bike parking across the downtown area, and really considering leaving those in year round. That would include some kind of winter maintenance. And then we also do some events, not a lot. Again, we will be a team of 4, so we have to kind of pick and choose some of our priorities, but we do always participate in the annual Bike to Wherever Day, used to be known as Bike to Work Day. Mark your calendars, that is going to be May 14th this year. So we partner with local businesses to host stations and just like a fun challenge. And that partnership continues to happen with Get Downtown and Walk Bike Washna. So we're very thankful for their continued participation. Other ways that the city um, supports that level of encouragement is with the Get Downtown and the commuter challenges. We have the Conquer the Cold, during the January, February timeframe. And I know Lillian Webb is gearing up for the commuter challenge, which runs the entire month of May. Anyone can sign up and participate in this. We have one other challenge that we do within the calendar year, which is the World Car Free Week. We're hoping to expand it to a month, which would be the kickoff at the Mayor's Green Fair in the fall. And, it is amazing what individual actions can add up to in the collective. So in the 2024 calendar year, we had 70 days of mode shift, where we were kind of actively encouraging and promoting and, giving away prizes for that. We reduced more than 115,000 pounds of greenhouse gases. And, we had almost 15,000 total trips taken by different means, maybe by walking, biking, public transit, working from home, carpooling. If you've never signed up for any of the challenges, I really encourage you to do that. They're a lot of fun, and they're a very easy lift to do. We cannot get to all of our goals without the continued partnerships from our residents and, organizations such as AAATA. They are a central piece to providing that transportation choice. Within the plan, we have some very specific strategies that were developed, such as increasing transit service and frequency. And I believe that with the recent support of the millage. That frequency I have seen rolled out already. There's the high frequency service for Route 4 and 104 on Washtenaw Avenue. That is much more than a 15-minute headway. I believe that they're 8 to 9 minute headways. So those local dollars are being put to good use already to help us reach our climate goals and transportation goals. And again, there's just this continued focus on frequency on primary corridors and secondary corridors from the ride. And again, we really rely on our partners, such as the team from the DDA, to help us get to those goals as well. Maybe it's through their street design manual, the downtown area circulation study, which this image is from, really helping the community come together to think about how we're going to achieve these much bigger goals. So two of the goals or strategies in the transportation plan are looking for opportunities to reallocate right-of-way space for public gatherings. I think the DDA has done an amazing job of utilizing our shared community spaces, closing those off to do outdoor dining and activating those spaces in the summer for festivals and activities that get people out and about, which we all want anyway. That's what keeps our communities vibrant. And another, just strategy that we want to work with them on is looking at how we price trips, how we look at parking, how we look at the structures, how many spots do we need. So there's just a really big conglomeration of different activities to tackle. One of the ways that we know that things are working is kind of that evaluation metric. I I don't want to say I get tired of hearing this, but I always have people say, actually, I did last week, well, I don't ever see anyone biking in the bike lanes. And so then I introduce myself and say, hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm one of the people biking in the bike lane. Um, we do know people are using them. You can see on the screen in the 4 different counting locations that the city has in the downtown loop, you can see what that data looks like today. They installed those in 2023. We had 100,000 bikes pass through those counters, in one given year, and that continues to rise. When I pulled this data, it was, wow, it's already April, so this would have been like late February, early March. So we are seeing quite a few trips already populating these fields. And we can also look at the different times of year. We can look at times of day. I think that the optics are when some people are traveling for destinations, they may not see bicyclists because maybe bikes are starting their journey a little earlier or a little later to miss some of those peak travel times and those peak interactions. We're also embracing technology and again, working with partners to see what opportunities there are. So one of the deployments that is, I believe, finally underway is our transit signal priority. So there are software and hardware being deployed to have a bus as it approaches a signal hold this green light open for longer to allow for more people that are on the bus to move through an intersection. Um, we want to prioritize our transit movements. That is one of our goals, is to help us get to those zero emissions, that we need more people on the bus and sharing that ride instead of those single occupancy vehicle trips. So we can use different forms of technology today, and we're looking at the technology in the future for what that could look like. All of the connected vehicles, that is so promising for our transportation system and mobility long term. But there is the opportunity to have buses a part of that system. And then we really do need to look at not just the transportation system, but what are the surrounding land uses. So the city is undertaking a very large-scale comprehensive plan development. I will say, I know that the plan development is underway. that is pretty much all the extent of my knowledge. So if you do have questions about that, I would strongly encourage you to talk to the planning team about that. But one of the ways that we are thinking about land use, maybe in other parts of the city, is this TC1 or transit corridor zoning priority, where we have less setbacks, we have more density, we have more opportunities for people to live, work, and play, and not have to own a car if they so choose. Um, there are a lot of different areas that have been rezoned. I just have one of those examples of this, the Eisenhower and State Street location. There were areas along the West Stadium and Maple, and I'm not sure if the Plymouth was ever completed, but I know that was in at least conversation. So it just provides a different way of looking at the existing, maybe underutilized land use, and how the city could better capitalize on that to meet the goals, the climate goals, the transportation goals, and myriad of other opportunities. Okay, I'm building in some time to pause so that there's not like 40 questions at the very end. So I would take another few questions if we have any, Sarah.
We sure do. Um,
Awesome. I'm glad I built it in.
okay. The intersection of Packard and State is a much better experience for pedestrians and cyclists after the rebuild. This is critical with Five Corners being built there. Just a comment.
Absolutely correct. Could not agree more.
More developments are being approved with high density and minimal parking requirements. How does the transportation department assess and offer feedback to site plan proposals?
I am personally not a part of that process. I can say that I believe we have removed as a community parking minimums. So that allows for a lot more density or re-envisioning of what maybe a big surface parking lot would have been, um, to a different, maybe more taxable land use. But that is really my in-depth knowledge of that. And I do apologize. I can connect you with one of my colleagues. Trevor Bryden is now working on that. So he may be a good person to reach out to on some of that question.
Okay, people tend to leave spin scooters all over the place,
Uh,
including in the middle of the sidewalks, which
oh,
blocks the path for wheelchair users and is a tripping hazard for visually impaired. And then this is my personal thing, is just generally annoying for just people walking as well. Um,
absolutely.
I just added that piece. Is it possible to install docking stations for scooters to keep sidewalks ADA accessible?
So the scooter is not supposed to be left there and is not supposed to allow for it to be locked. So my understanding, like, you go up, you scan the, I've never ridden one. I have never done that. So my apologies. This is my understanding. You go in, you scan it, you get on, you park it. If it's not parked in this in a space it's supposed to, like out of the kind of right of way, it's not supposed to lock. So is it possible that somebody's leaving it there and they're still being charged for it? Yep. I would say if you do encounter that, and I realize that this is asking someone who is trying to just navigate and get to their space, we would really appreciate you doing a A2 Fix It ticket. We will have spin deployed to go and move that immediately. That is the agreement. We do not want to block spaces for any person. Um, that is very, very important. And if we do see an uptick in that, that would be something we would need to report back to City Council and the vendor. So we want to know that. Please do use that mechanism to report that.
Alrighty. Will you be addressing the driverless cars in Ann Arbor and their impact on transportation issues you've addressed? What is Ann Arbor's goals with driverless vehicles?
Don't think we have any right now. I believe that May Mobility was beta testing that. I did have a presentation and actually sat in one. There was a driver in it the whole time. Um, that is a research question that I am less familiar about. My understanding is it really struggles to work with fog, snow, which we have a lot of in Michigan. So maybe the like tree and the American Center for Mobility are kind of beta testing and testing that sort of technology in a much more real world setting. I am less familiar with that.
Gotcha. I think another kind of good thing to say about this is that, and you and I talked about it recently, Suzanne, is that we have no agreements with any of these people. It is
Correct. Thank
fully
you.
a University of Michigan thing, or Toyota also has some things that they're doing, and because they're very, very close by to us. So
Hmm.
um,
Thank
it's
you.
not anything that like we are in
Mm-mm.
contract with or have negotiations or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Alrighty, that is all for right now.
Okay. All right. I think we are, yeah, we're getting close. All right. Another way that we are, oh, it'll load, that we are doing evaluation is through our annual report. So when I came on, our first annual report was in 2022. This is showing you a little bit of our 2023 snapshot. So we provide a little bit of background. The we do have, this is not going to open up here, but the 5-year crash trend, some of that visualization of what our safety numbers look like over time, how many people during that time frame from like 2018 to 2022 were killed or were involved in serious crashes. And then we also look at some of the achievements that we've been able to make within one calendar year. So this map would have displayed new facilities such as bike lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks, leading pedestrian intervals, audible pedestrian signals. Um, you can go to our A2, you can just Google A2 Vision Zero, scroll down to annual snapshot, and that information will be provided. Um, I always try to include some nice visuals to where those facilities are located and also how this progress is aligning with our transportation master plan. There are over 70 strategies in the plan. I don't report on them every year. Sometimes we just don't make progress. Some of these are long-term, year 11 through 20 for progress. And so we're trying to really just capture those early wins and successes across the community to demonstrate that we are making progress. Some years are better than others in terms of facilities. So in 2023, for example, we added or upgraded 12.1 miles of bike facilities and we addressed 21 bike intersections. That's a lot. That is a lot of improvement. Maybe it was just a quick build, maybe it was pavement markings, maybe some green paint and bike boxes, but looking at those collectively over time really add up very quickly. Talk about our bike parking pilot program. We feature the local traffic calming petition program here, what some of those treatments look like. And again, aligning it back to the strategies in the plan and how we are making progress from year to year. So again, those are on the A2 Vision Zero website. 2 years are up. I am finalizing the 2024 annual snapshot right now. Other ways that we kind of encourage or educate people is just, we try things. I have a Canva account, so I was like, hey, maybe we can come up with something where we're showing people how to commute, what it looks like to ride the bus, getting to your final destination. We had our intern do a short video. We did a little bit of a campaign. I will say the campaign was very, very low budget. Um, just to see what people, would share and whether or not they like the idea of, trying a different commute. We've talked a little bit about technology and climate, providing different modes for people to use, such as those shared mobility modes. And I think one of my most impactful slides is when people say thank you. Um, we get a lot of people that hate what we're doing. A lot. They're very, very vocal, and it can be very, very hard to read, but it is important to read because these are constituents that we need to hear from, and we need to understand where they are as a resident, what they like and what they don't like. But sometimes the positive voices don't always get profiled. So I really like to keep any and all of these positive comments that we do get. I don't get as many positive comments as I get negative, but I'm a glass half full sort of gal. So when we had done these pavement marking treatments at Dexter and Maple, which again is my driving route, bike route. I had somebody reach out to me and how much better they felt, how much safer they felt just with this. And that really left a lasting impression and impact on me. So I would encourage you to let us know when things are not working well. But if something is working well, it's really nice to hear that too. There are a lot of very hardworking people at the city, and they do amazing work and are balancing a lot of challenging interests all at the same time. So say thanks if you ever get a chance. So, upcoming projects, things that you could inform yourself on what's going on. We do have on the engineering website all of the projects, sidewalk construction, street maintenance, resurfacing, bridge. You can turn on and off layers. It is interactive. It's very easy to use to show you kind of where those projects are happening. You know, I think some of the big impacts that I've already seen in my commute to work each day is the Miller Road closures, and that traffic being diverted, the cyclists being diverted to other areas. And we also have a dynamic map that shows all of our long-term capital improvement program um, projects. It's not just transportation. You can look and see what's happening at the airport, what's happening at parks, sanitary sewer, solid waste. That is a great resource to give you a general idea of how much money it may take to complete that project and the general time frame by which the city is planning for that work. So I just have a couple closing slides, a couple other photos from Earhart, some wonderful photos from the Main Street Association of where people would like to be. And again, this is just repurposing that street for much more people focused. A photo from Caitlin Sledge, a former intern back at downtown State Street. And again, my shameless plug for Bike to Wherever Day, and I have the wrong year there. Forgive me for that. It is 2025, but May 14th, save the date. We will be getting community-based information out really soon. We're just starting to get that out for all of the station hosts. It's a fun, easy way to try a different way to get to work or maybe to any destination on that day. We will do a challenge. And prizes always help motivate. So please do be ready for that. And this is our last slide for any lasting questions that you may have.
Thank you, Suzanne. David Stone said, "Hey, I'm in the anywhere photo, far left." I love that.
Yes. That
Um,
okay, that's made my week. That is awesome. Thank you.
I love that so much. Okay, a couple more.
Of
Um,
course.
do you think that our train station will ever be relocated to a better location? In addition, do you see a future where a commuter train would connect Ann Arbor to DTW and Detroit?
This is a somewhat cheeky response, but I would ask the Federal Rail Administration because if memory serves, that's who would make some of that decision.
Agreed. There has been a sustainability discussion on reducing car miles traveled. How does the transportation department approach balancing day-to-day resident activity with a high volume of commuters?
Yeah, so we think about it like this. If we can provide residents options to travel outside of their vehicle, then that frees up a space for someone who may have no other choice but to drive because of maybe the distance or any other reason. Um, by freeing up that space, then I'm not taking that space up like in my own personal automobile. So I like having that mode shift and that kind of mindset. Ideally, we would like to capture those commuters before they get to the city. We do have, a couple park and ride lots. I'm a direct beneficiary of those. Those are also opportunities for people to complete their journey in a much more um, climate friendly way. Again, I know that the front end may be vehicle heavy, but there's a lot of advances in, cleaner vehicles, electric vehicles, and I think the combination of all of these activities is what's going to help us get to that ambitious goal.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, so helpful. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Oh, thank you.
I don't see any more
Okay.
questions as of right now. If any do come up, I will definitely get them to Suzanne, and so that way she can answer your questions. Thank you so much for coming and talking.
Well, thank you all. Again, we like literally could not do it without you. We're so thankful for this kind of opportunity to speak about transportation and to, make sure that we're kind of in alignment. We want to be responsive to our citizens. You guys are part of this is how we get things done, that kind of excitement and energy. So we really do appreciate your participation in helping us meet these goals.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Alrighty, just a couple more announcements before we end for the entire night. I have put up all of the videos for anything that we have done on via Zoom so far. They are on the Community Academy webpage under the 2025 schedule, and then it's each individual that we have done via Zoom has a link at the end of it that you can press and you can go back and view. This one will be added in a couple of weeks. It does take some time to get them on. So I just wanted to let you know that next week, we will have two tours. It'll be, Wheeler on Tuesday, wastewater on Wednesday. These are, my two favorite tours because you will see so much. So highly recommend it. I hope that I get to see, a lot of you there. For the wastewater tour, please feel free to bring a mask. In certain areas, it can get the smell can be a little pungent, but you should also be fine. So just wanted to throw that out there. Other than that, thank you all so much, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.